Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video I thought I'd share a bit of my process on how I take a grayscale painting and turn it into color. This isn't really a step-by-step tutorial, more like me talking through what I personally do to go from grayscale to color. And this is my primary workflow for art as shown on screen, as it allows me to focus more on the values rather than the color. So let's get right into it. So I always start in grayscale. It just helps me think about shapes and lighting without getting distracted by picking any colors. I usually block in everything with a base color and then block in individual values over that in different layers. You can also work in one layer if that's what you were used to, but I personally like separating things into different layers. If you're new to painting in grayscale, I highly recommend using references. You can even take your reference photo and make it black and white. Just add a color layer set to color mode and fill it with black or white to remove the color. This helps you focus purely on values and better understand how bright or dark each part of your image should be. Being able to recognize the value of a color is one of the most important skills in painting, in my opinion. It's what makes your colors look believable later on. Once you get used to this process, you start to understand that some colors are naturally lighter or darker than others, even when they're the same saturation. For example, colors like red, yellow, and orange tend to sit on the lighter side of the value scale, while blue and purple are inherently darker. So even if those colors are at full saturation, the yellows will appear much brighter than the blues or purples. Keeping that in mind when colorizing helps you maintain accurate values and avoid unintentional contrast issues. Eventually, when you have a grasp on drawing in grayscale, all of these things will come natural to you, with or without reference. Once my grayscale values feel solid, that's when I start adding color. There are a few different ways to do this, and honestly it just depends on the look you're going for. Some methods will work better than others depending on your values and what you are going for. The most common method is using a color layer mode on top of your grayscale. This lets you paint color without affecting the values underneath. I'll usually start broad, like warm tones for the skin, cooler tones for the shadows, maybe a bit of saturation in the lights, just to get an overall feel before refining it. The caveat with this layer mode is that sometimes for lighter values, it gives the art a muddy feel to it. So that's when you work around it by either using another layer mode or layering multiple different layer modes on top of it. Another approach to coloring grayscale is using various layer modes such as overlay, soft light, hard light, or multiply. Overlay tends to make things pop more because it increases contrast or subtle painterly feel. Hard light can create a stronger, more dramatic look. It really boosts both the highlights and shadows, so I usually use it sparingly or lower the opacity of it. Multiply, on the other hand, is great for deepening shadows or adding a bit of atmosphere. It darkens the values underneath, which can help tie the lighting together or make certain areas feel more grounded. Sometimes I'll stack a few different layer modes and just play around until it looks right. It's really about experimenting. There isn't just one correct way. When I'm working in grayscale, I always try to follow this one important rule. Your darkest light should never be darker than your lightest dark. Basically, your light areas and shadow areas shouldn't overlap in value, otherwise the lighting can start to feel confusing. Keeping that separation helps the image read clearly and makes it a lot easier for you when you start colorizing later. Let's talk about my primary method I use to color in my grayscale, and I think it's a very underrated method. I'll often use the color balance slider to color in my values. It's such a useful tool because it lets you push color into the shadows, midtones, and highlights separately. For example, I might add more blues into the shadows, a bit of warmth into the midtones, and maybe some yellow or red into the highlights to make the lighting feel more cohesive, or vice versa, depending on how I feel. It's a really quick way to adjust the mood or temperature of the piece without repainting anything. For instance, for this Griffith piece that's on screen right now, I wanted a cool light source and warm shadows, so I moved the color balance slider to blue for the highlights and a yellowish red for shadows. Something I like to do after colorizing is checking the values again with that trick I told you earlier on in the video, adding a temporary black and white adjustment layer on top to make sure nothing got lost when color was added. Sometimes the colors trick your eyes into thinking that the values changed, so double checking keeps things consistent. Overall, the biggest tip I can give is don't rush the color stage or the grayscale stage. Grayscale painting is like building the structure, and color is just dressing it all up. Take your time layering subtle tones, shifting hues slightly between light and shadow, and thinking about light-temperature relationships. warm light means cooler shadows and vice versa. Once I'm happy with all the colors and the overall lighting, I move on to refining the piece. This is where everything starts coming together. At this stage, I'll usually merge some of my layers or make a copy of the entire painting flattened so I can paint more directly. I usually like adding a texture brush to my painting to add some more visual interest. I'll also use linear dodge, also known as the add layer or color dodge layers, very subtly to bring out certain highlights or light sources, and the keyword is subtle because a little goes a long way. A touch of rim light or a bright reflection can make the lighting feel more dynamic. Another thing I do during this stage is unifying the colors. Sometimes after colorizing, certain parts feel like they belong to different lighting environments or just seem like they don't fit at all. To fix that, I'll fill the entire piece with a color somewhere in the middle of the color wheel and set that to hard light, then lower the opacity. For instance, with this Griffith piece on screen, I'm adding a cool layer over it and also showing the opposite. I really think it ties all the colors together and makes the artwork feel like it exists under a consistent light source. After that, it's mostly small adjustments, maybe using levels or curves to tweak the contrast or slightly pushing the saturation with color balance again over the entire piece. You can even add a gradient map on top and set it to a low opacity for a quick mood adjustment. And finally, I'll sit back and ask myself if the values and colors all support the focus of the piece. At this point, you're not really changing the painting, you're polishing it, giving it that final layer of doneness. And that's pretty much my full process for going from grayscale to color. It might seem like a lot at first, but once you get used to it, it becomes second nature. And honestly, it's such a relaxing way to paint because you don't have to juggle color and value at the same time. The color comes later. I really recommend experimenting with different methods. Try out color layers, overlays, the color balance tool, or even a mix of all of them, and just see what feels right for your workflow. Everyone paints differently, and the fun part is figuring out what clicks for you. If you found this helpful, feel free to leave a like or comment letting me know what part of the process you want me to dive deeper into next, or any other topics you'd like for me to cover. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.